This year, 2018, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of St. Teresa's church building. This short documentary chronicles a little of the history of how the church came to be. Much of the information was garnered from Father Joseph Favado's writings. He was a most eloquent writer and thankfully wrote down the history, probably foreseeing an event such as we are celebrating today. Some of the history was obtained from the archives of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Thunder Bay, and some was obtained from a few parishioners who are still around today. St. Teresa's Parish in Kakabeka Falls began as a missionary post in the 1950s. One of the priests instrumental in starting the missions of both Kakabeka Falls and Shabandawan was Father Joseph Sano, then parish priest of St. Augustine's Parish in Baird. Father Sano began as a parish priest at St. Augustine's Church on Town Line Road in the 1950s. People traveled from the Kakabeka area and from townships to the west and south of Kakabeka to St. Augustine's Church for Sunday Mass. In the winter, travel could be treacherous, and with large families and small cars, it was difficult to consistently attend Mass. Without a place of worship in Kakabeka Falls, in those early years, parishioners' homes were offered for Sunday Mass. In Kakabeka Falls, the home of Sean Sharon was one of the first where the faithful gathered for Mass twice a month, said by Father Sano. Her home was also offered for teas and meetings. In 1959, Father Sano was transferred to Schreiber. The parishioners were sad to lose him. Father Bellin, a Scalabrini priest, took over services at St. Augustine's Church and area. Scalabrini priests were from a Roman Catholic Institute of Priests and Brothers founded by Giovanni Battista Scalabrini, bishop in Italy in 1887. Their mission was to maintain the Catholic faith and practice among Italian immigrants to the New World. Their mission was also to establish churches, schools, and missionary homes in various Italian communities in North and South America. Scalabrini was named a saint after his death. The following year, Father Joseph Favado, another Scalabrini priest from Chicago, came as a summer replacement for Father Bellin. He stayed for 19 years, from 1960 to 1979. The late 1950s and the 1960s were turbulent times for the world. The 60s were dominated by the Vietnam War, civil rights protests, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the assassinations of U.S. President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. In 1962, the Beatles released their first single, Love Me Do, in the United Kingdom, and Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in Arkansas. In 1968, the first manned Apollo mission, Apollo 7, was launched by NASA, and in 1969, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon. Also in 1968, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was elected as Prime Minister of Canada. While the world was changing, the small congregation in the rural northwestern Ontario community of Kakabeka Falls continued to grow. The congregation could no longer fit in the parishioners' homes. In 1958, 1959, and 1960, Sunday Mass was held once a month in the basement of the Old Canadian Legion. The Legion was then located on Clergue Street in Kakabeka Falls. As the Legion location was still reeking with the smoke and smell of liquor from the Saturday nights before Sunday Masses, Father Favado and the parishioners again looked for a new venue for the congregation. Starting in the spring of 1961, Mass was held in the vacated grocery store of Mr. and Mrs. Tony Delvecchio on the corner of Delvecchio Street and Clergue Street in Kakabeka Falls. Mass was held there every Sunday, but by Christmas, it was getting too small. A meeting was held about a possibility of building a little church, but the outcome seemed dubious. Linnell Bergsteden, Debbie Malinowski, and Gary Labine have their first communion in Delvecchio's store, approximately 1961. Father Favado was instrumental in making St. Teresa's Church as it is today. He wrote in his recollections, "Since I had never been a cook, I would often go to the hotel by the falls for a solid meal. The original Kakabeka Falls Hotel, owned by Steve and Phyllis Dazinski, was located by the falls. It was torn down in 1962 after the new hotel was built in its present location in the village in 1961. Father Favado wrote, "Since the first time I met him, Steve Dazinski kept telling me, 'Father, we should have a church here.' With a weekly collection of $65 in 1960, I just smiled at him, but the idea kept working in my mind. On my initiative, I approached the bishop and he gave me the green light, adding, 'Only 40 by 40 feet. I told Steve about it and he said, 'Come on, Father, let's make it 50 by 40. And so it is. Father Sano had the foresight to purchase the original property, a 50-foot lot on Porter Street in Kakabeka Falls in 1957. In 1962, Father Favado obtained the bishop's permission to purchase 3 more lots from G.R. Duncan, and it was through the benevolence of Mr. Tomlinson of Tomlinson's Contracting Company that the 2 lots north of the church were acquired. Father Favado wrote, "I had always been eyeing the property just north of the church. It belonged to a non-Catholic contractor. I wrote to him asking, out of mere curiosity, how much he wanted for selling it. He answered, 'You may have it for $1. The bishop was overjoyed and got it. It came in handy for our septic field when we installed the much-needed indoor washrooms. The church property consists of 6 lots on Porter Street. Steve Dzinski volunteered to be both architect and contractor. He and Francis Popeye Richard took a road trip to northern communities to look at other churches to get ideas, and a plan was developed. The plan was to build the basement and use it for Mass, as well as church events until funds allowed the completion of the church. Father Favato wrote to Bishop E.Q. Jennings on March 15, 1962. The shape will be pyramidal to the ground. This way we avoid ceiling and sidewalls, more or less the way the new Protestant church looks on Walkover Street in Port Arthur. On April 29, 1962, a groundbreaking ceremony was held. Steve Dzinski, along with other devout parishioners offering their labor, began the task of building a church. Father Favato on his knees helping with the foundation. To avoid pillars in the basement and future hall, 42-foot long steel beams were installed, the entire width of the building. Many parishioners donated their time. As an example, Mr. Pat Doherty looked after the wiring and electric heating free of charge. Father Favato also helped with manual labor. Here he can be seen working with the volunteers. He wrote, "I myself spend long hours and days helping nailing and stapling the insulation." By 1962, the basement church was ready, and we made our pews after purchasing the chairs. Father Favato also wrote, "On Saturday we would remove the tables and chairs to prepare the place for Mass, and on Monday do the opposite for the evening bingo." In addition to bingo, weekly after-Mass coffee, special teas, meetings, and other celebrations took place in the basement hall and continue to this day. In January 1963, Father Favato wrote to Bishop Jennings, "The basement at Kakabeka Falls has met with general praise, and I'm sure that Your Excellency will like the job. As we keep it locked most of the time, a key may be borrowed from Mr. Dzinski at the hotel. He has been my architect, contractor, laborer, for free, naturally. In fact, he also fed at the same price all those who helped in the work." The first Mass in the basement church was held on Sunday, July 26, 1962, with the solemn blessing of the basement church by Most Reverend E.Q. Jennings on August 18, 1963. Parishioners such as the late Francis and Gwen Richard also donated their time. Gwen played the organ for many years, both in the basement church and the main church, until they moved to Thunder Bay in their later years. For many years, Francis Popeye Richard volunteered his time to count and record the collection and make the deposit each week. For 6 years, this initial foundation played an important role in the parish. Not only used for Mass, it was the gathering place for meetings, teas, and other parish events. In 1968, when the covering of the basement roof was worn out and there were leaks all over, they decided they needed to finish the building. On March 11, 1968, Father Favato wrote to the bishop, "It is a matter of emergency at the present moment. As recently as last Saturday, when we had the first thaw and rain, I found an inch of water on the floor of the crypt, so I rushed around the village to borrow pots and pans. The bishop gave the go-ahead to finish the church." Again, Steve Dzinski and other devout parishioners stepped up to the plate, and again, Pat Doherty saw to the wiring and electrical heating, donating his labor free of charge. The beams inside the church were ordered from Unitized Manufacturing Company in Thunder Bay. They are made of BC cedar and were ordered with the permission of the bishop months before construction began in June of 1968. Father Favato felt they could save quite a bit if they could do the work themselves. Steve Dzinski wisely pointed out to the father that it was too big a job for all voluntary labor. Father Favato was tireless in his desire to help the parish. Obtaining enough money for the project was a constant worry for him. In a letter to the bishop, he noted that in 1967, the Kakabeka congregation contributed the amount of $5,300 toward the parish, between the Sunday contributions and the social activities. He even looked to his family for help. He borrowed $4,500 from his stepbrother in Italy. His stepbrother agreed to cancel the interest on the money, and Father Favato told the bishop he may also be in the position to donate the whole. His sister donated the money to purchase the organ. Construction proceeded quickly. The beams and cedar arrived from British Columbia in late June 1968, and the church was completed 2 months later, in August 1968. The plan to have skylights on the roof was revised, and Father wrote, "Since there will be no windows on the roof, we have decided to provide natural lighting by installing a strip of 22-inch clear panes along the top edge of the front of the church only, in order not to blind the eyes looking toward the altar." Later, it was decided to put in colored glass windows at the back of the church on the wall beside the altar to allow for more light. The stainless steel cross on the top of St. Teresa's church is made with sharp edges to prevent birds from landing on it and soiling the front of the church. The church was completed in August 1968, a dream come true. always thinking ahead, in June 1968, Father wrote to Bishop Jennings updating him on the progress of the construction and asking, would it be possible to have both the blessing and confirmation on the same day, August 25th? The two sisters of St. Joseph are supposed to end a course of catechism instruction to the children on the 24th. A good preparation indeed. Besides, we are due for confirmation, as the last one was in 1965. 37 confirmation candidates from both Baird and St. Teresa's Church received the sacrament of confirmation on August 25, 1968. There were 14 girls and 23 boys. As confirmation occurred every 3 years or so, the candidates aged from 9 years old to 13 years old, as well as adults. Father Favato wrote, after the blessing, Bishop Jennings, as we were going down for refreshments, stopped me and asked, how much did you spend for it? I told him $39,000. He said, tell me again. I repeated, $39,000. The only monetary help came from the Catholic Extension Society of Canada, which contributed $5,000. The rest was paid through the untiring help of our Catholic Women's League through bingo and other money-raising activities. Some of the 37 confirmation candidates provided pictures for this little documentary. Kenny Malinowski, son of longtime parishioners Dorothy and Elgin Malinowski, and his sponsor, Wally Labine. Donald Dak Richard, son of Francis and Gwen Richard, and his sponsor, Steve Dazinski. Shirley Nemi Burke, with her mother and brothers prior to the confirmation. Her sponsor was her cousin, Linnell Bergsteden. Jim Burke with his father and siblings prior to the confirmation. His sponsor was his uncle, Coase Bergsteden. Michelle Labine and her sponsor. On August 27, 1972, and after only 10 years, all debt was paid, and the mortgage was burnt in the presence of Most Reverend Gallagher, Bishop of Thunder Bay, amid the shouts of joy of the congregation. In those days, burning of the mortgage was a celebratory event, followed by a party. Mrs. Evelyn Labine helped Father Favato with the burning. In 1978, the much-needed washrooms, along with the septic field, were added. In 1979, Father Favato was transferred to become pastor at St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Revelstoke, BC. He celebrated 50 years as a priest in New Westminster, BC on June 29, 1989. St. Augustine, St. Teresa's Parish was blessed with wonderful clergy following the departure of Father Favato. Father Ernest Tremblay, 1980 to 1984. Father Anthony Turner, 1984 to 1986. Father Kenneth Potty, 1986 to 1990. Father Kieran Donnelly, 1990 to 1997. Father Henrik Augustinowitz, 1997 to 2015. Father Joseph Arakiam, 2015 to 2017. Current pastor, Father Randall Morisseau. We are indebted to the St. Teresa's Women's Group, who were and continue to be selfless in their work and devotion to the Church. The original CWL, Catholic Women's League, was established in 1962. There were too many members of the CWL over the years to list here. Many women gave of their time to help the Church and continue to do so. Members in 1993 that attended a meeting show a strong, active group of women. In 2009, several members of the St. Teresa's Women's Group were honored with a life membership in recognition of the many years of hard work and commitment to the Church, the parish, and the community. Honored were Dorothy Malinowski, Mary Andrachuk, Sean Sharon, Lori Babick, Helen Plouffe, Jane Joutala, and Minnie Lammers. A huge debt of gratitude is owed to all the parishioners of St. Teresa's Church, and especially those who, 50 years ago this year, through their dedication and hard work, built God's Church, enabling us to celebrate this wonderful occasion.